pavilion this year at COP. It's the first time we've had a pavilion. We're adjacent to the Global Alliance for Building and Construction, who we've shared a pavilion with or been a partner with them for the previous 2 COPs. This year we have our own space, and we're really grateful to the partners on our pavilion. You can see them listed on our right, and the event that you've come to is by one of our partners, the American Concrete Institute, and their initiative NEU, which we're delighted to be able to host you as partners and host your event today. So welcome to those who are joining on a live stream. You're at COP28, and you're at the Global Cement and Concrete Association Pavilion at an event on the American Concrete Institute and their initiative NEU. Delighted to have speakers, the President, Tony Nanni, and then Dean Frank, Executive Director of the initiative, the NEU initiative, and then Karen Scrivener, Professor Karen Scrivener from EPFL will be our final speaker before we open up to a panel and a time for discussion. So without any further ado, Tony, if I could just introduce you as President of the American Concrete Institute and Professor and Chair of the University of Miami Civil Engineering and Architecture Department. Tony, over to you.
Well, Andrew, you do this job incredibly well, I have to admit. You could have another job as MC. Okay, well, good afternoon, or good morning, it's still morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the most exciting event of COP28. So we start the right way, right? My job today in 10 minutes is really to tell you a couple of things about ACI, for the ones of you who are not familiar with this great institute, and then go on and really get to the key issue, that is the development and deployment of a new code. So ACI, I just want to bring your attention to the vision of ACI, and it's really, in my mind, the most critical thing that we do in terms of empowering the future. And by the way, this free membership. The statistics are there, but I think I want to bring up to your attention 2 items. First of all, the building code. The flagship of ACI, the American Concrete Institute, is ACI 318 and is used in 60 countries all over the world. The other, do we need low carbon concrete? I think this slide repeats many of the things that we have heard over the last few days, and this is really what you all know very well. But I want to bring your attention to the 3rd bullet item there. That is, the majority of emission come from cement production. Actually, here we have the CEO of Cemex, so he knows that very well, what that means. But the scale of use is really what makes the difference. And actually, my next slide, I'm going to quote what Karen has said over the years. So if you look at per kilogram or per unit volume, the amount of concrete that we use, we are over 400 million cubic meters, which is, you know, for people who are familiar with the US, about 600 times the Hoover Dams every year. So the amount of concrete is so significant, and that's why we think that is the culprit of the carbon emission. But then again, if you look at this beautiful figure, if you look per unit weight or per unit volume, we are not doing bad at all. So that doesn't take away from our responsibility to do better, but I think it's very clear that we are not necessarily the bad, I would say, the bad player in this playground. The issue of what is low carbon concrete, I think the question that we hear at ACI from people coming to us is, there a one concrete mixture to rule them all? And the answer is no. And the other item that we need to be cognizant of is that no current industry standard definition is available. So these are issues that provide us with an opportunity to jump in and do better things. What is low carbon concrete? Well, low carbon concrete is a design goal, so don't forget this. And is a design goal that depends on the region of the world you're in. The situation in North America is different from Europe, is different from Latin America, is different from this part of the world. And the other issue that you have to be cognizant of is that we, okay, all right, perfect. It's very difficult for me to speak into the mic and look at the screen, but the other thing that I wanted to make is that make a point of is that this is a constantly changing target. That means we are improving on a daily basis on what we're doing. How do we measure the low carbon concrete? Well, it's rather simple. If you think in terms of warming potential, and then the global warming potential, the GWP, is what we have determined at this point in time to be the quantitative measurement for low carbon concrete. What are the issues that prevent us to be successful today? Or what are the barriers that we recognize as challenges, maybe starting from the right-hand side, the fear of cost. We recognize that the three pillars of sustainability include economics, okay? So if you are not competitive on a first cost basis, very difficult that industry will embrace it. Knowledge transfer, this is where ACI comes into play. It's fundamental to educate people at all levels, even the public. And then political will. This is a touchy issue. I'm a firm believer that without mandates, we are not going to make the progress that we need to make rapidly. So this is the political will, I think, is fundamental. Then the liability. Particularly if you look at contractors, not so much the engineers and the producer, is this issue of risk. Okay, when you introduce new materials, what are the issues that you are facing and can you afford it? And so the risk when you have this potential liability is really something that withhold the progress in our community. And finally, space and capital. Obviously, these things, if you want to improve, for example, at the ready-mix plan and add another cement silos or another supplementary cementitious material silo, this will have a cost and will have implication on space. So these are the things that we need to account for. Well, finally, what is that do we need? We need to determine the GWP of concrete as a material system. We need to set limits and reasonable limits, limits that we can reach progressively and hopefully with a great, some great announcement by 2030 without having to wait for 2050. And the other thing that many may not totally understand is the compatibility of a code or a documentation that relates to carbon as a material system in terms of sustainability to the other codes that deal with safety and serviceability. So there has to be a link between the two. So now let me get to where we are, and then I'm going to unveil this. This is the product of just less than a year amount of work, just to show you the commitment of the Institute to develop what we strongly believe is the first code on low carbon concrete. As the first document in this arena, obviously, is far from being perfect. Let me bring you back to our flagship, ACI 318. It has been in place for over 100 years. And now is over 650 pages. It started with 13. So we have a long way to go, but this is a fundamental stepping stone. Few items related to the code itself, because I think I'm running out of time. This first edition provides you a percentage of a benchmark. How much do you want to improve your low carbon concrete? The benchmark, unfortunately, come from the data that we have. And today, we only have data from NRMCA in the United States, but we recognize that these data are regional. But the fact that we have data in the code only related to these regions does not prevent its use in other parts of the world. We use GWP as the measure, and we relate it to strength. strength of concrete, the compressive strength. We recognize that this is far from being ideal, but this is where we have the data. So the collection of data related to use of a structure, the durability, the LCA is really what is most important. And in the second edition, we hope to provide that. We start now with the requirements on the large projects, recommendation and reporting only for the smaller projects, so to give time to the industry to come up to speed. And then how we measure the GPA, GWP is a way average. We will have also sample calculations on the website. Maybe Dean Frank will tell you more. This is a task that NEU will undertake. And finally, how is this applicable outside North America? You see it written here. Look at the bullet item that says adoptable globally by using data available in the region. So the entire effort of this code, even though we recognize it's a first edition, is to be used by everyone around the globe. It's easy to use, we strongly believe that, and is focused specifically on GWP. Is a code. Code means is written in mandatory language. This is not a guide, you should. This code says you shall. So please recognize that. And in the future edition, we will tackle structures that include their life cycle, the sustainability, the resiliency, and as we move forward. And with this, I thank you for your attention, and we go to Matt.
Tony, thank you so much. We'll have opportunity for questions for Tony. So Dean Frank, Executive Director with NEU, it's an initiative from ACI that Dean will explain. Dean's background is primarily in the precast industry and laboratory testing, etc. And so it's very comprehensible when Dean explained his background, why he's Executive Director of this really innovative, exciting new initiative from ACI. Dean, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Can you hear me okay? Okay, so we're going to talk about NEU. What is NEU? First off, it is pronounced NEU, and it is a wordplay on carbon neutrality. So it's not an acronym, but it is one of 3 centers of excellence that ACI has developed. Second center of excellence after one devoted to non-metallic materials, and then one following on productivity in the industry. But I'll give you a little bit of insight as to what NEU is all about. So why do we focus on carbon? I think, probably everyone in this room, I'm speaking to the choir, but as an industry, we all know we kind of get beaten over the head over and over again. Tony did a good explanation as to why we have such a significant carbon footprint, because it's just so widely used. But we also know that sustainability is more than just global warming. There's other aspects. Of course, the environmental and social are the ones that a lot of people forget about and focus on environmental, but they all play into it. We also know that concrete shines when it comes to sustainability, especially with respect to resilience, thermal mass, durability, and so forth. Everyone in this room knows that we can't live as a civilized society without concrete. The good news is we can make a difference. So we're the answer. We're the solution to some of the problems, and the potential for making improvements is there. Unfortunately, global warming is affecting everyone. CO2 knows no boundaries or borders, so we all have to deal with it. We also know that the industry is in an excellent position to make a difference, and I repeat this over and over again just because it's my own personal experience. As Andrew mentioned, I've spent many years in the precast concrete industry, 10.5 years as the Director of Quality and Sustainability at PCI, where we did an LCA, very comprehensive LCA. We were told the most comprehensive LCA at the time, comparative, 5-story office building, different framing types, cast in place structural steel, different enclosure systems. And so their precasters are really excited. We're going to have this LCA, and it's going to show how the precast industry is going to shine. And lo and behold, at the end of the 2 years it took to write this LCA, all the solutions and construction methods came within the margin of error. And so lots of folks were a little bit disappointed with those results. And I just said, hey, look, there's a story to be said here. The good news is, as an industry, the concrete industry has tremendous potential to make improvements. And I don't think other building materials have that advantage as the concrete industry does. So I'm not here to bash other materials. I'm just saying as a concrete industry, we're in a great position. So to be an answer. So the other thing about CO2 is we can measure it. So, you can't improve what you don't measure or what you can't measure. So again, that's why we're focusing on carbon neutrality with this center of excellence. So we know as an industry, there's other organizations that have developed roadmaps. So here's the roadmap developed by the Portland Cement Association. I'm not going to go into the details here, but just to show you that this is one potential solution that's been proposed. Of course, GCCA has proposed a solution as well. So again, you see what I'm showing here is different technologies and methods for alleviating the CO2 emissions. And the point of showing this to you is that there's really not one method. There's not the silver bullet that we can all rely on. It's going to take a combination of things for us to get to carbon neutrality. And so with that, we have organizations out there promoting themselves as, well, we have the solution. You can reduce your carbon with this material or that material. And so as professionals, design professionals, architects, engineers, whoever, what do we do? There's a lot of overwhelming information in the marketplace. As a matter of fact, you just go grocery shopping and you might find a package of chicken enchilada bake that's carbon neutral. Well, gee, how do you measure that? I'm just not really sure. I'm kind of baffled. Is it the egg or is it the chicken? I don't know. I mean, I want to see the criteria here. So, obviously, concrete industry is multifaceted. There's a lot of players, a lot of stakeholders. The industry professionals have a very wide degree of knowledge with respect to these subjects. End users know even less. So, again, they're susceptible to those messages in the grocery store. And we need accelerated adoption. So we've already found out, even at this COP that we're already behind, the global stock take from what I hear is maybe won't hit the 1.5 with our current trajectory. So we're going to have to accelerate these technologies. The good news is ACI had the forethought of creating a center of excellence that was devoted to this subject. We know that concrete is a great material, but let's take care of this negative perception and also make a difference for the world and help concrete remain a preferred building material. So ACI has been around for a long, long time, over 100 years. They're not a trade association, so they're not biased in the sense that they make money on tonnage or the amount of material sold. The focus is on education, training, and certification, code development, and getting industry stakeholders involved. So they're in a great position to try and amplify this message. And of course, if you've ever been involved with committees, ASTM, ACI, or whatever, you know that there's a constraint. It's called the consensus process that tends to slow things down. So fortunately for us, we are not constrained by the consensus process, so we can move quickly. That's the idea of a center of excellence, is to focus on implementation. So NEU is fairly new. We've been around for a little over a year. I've been in this position for almost exactly a year, and it's been the fastest year of my life, I think. So, and it's great. So it's all very, very good. Our mission is to drive education awareness and adoption of carbon neutral concrete materials and technologies, but I like to revise our mission a little bit and just say that we want to drive education awareness and appropriate adoption. So we want people to make smart decisions in the marketplace, because we don't want people making a mistake, because it's just going to slow things down. So what are our core functions? We've identified our material and technology validation and verification program that's based on ISO 17029 as one of our main things that we've been focusing on, getting that on the streets. I'm happy to talk to folks more about that. There's a webinar on our website where I go into more detail. I don't simply have time to talk about it at the moment, but I would be happy to talk to anyone who wants to talk about validation. Of course, that leads to our tech transfer and acceleration. So once we identify a high potential material technology, we want to try and grease the skids and get it out to market as quickly as possible. And of course, education, advocacy, working with the ACI committees, training and professional development, and our international outreach. So we have a very great international outreach that Tony mentioned before. So I want to again thank ACI as the founding member of NEU. Without their forethought, we wouldn't be here today listening to me drone on about carbon neutral concrete, but I'm glad that you are. I also want to thank our sustaining members, Meta, Facebook, and then Breakthrough Energy, which is Bill Gates' philanthropic organization, giving us the head start, fortunately, to establish this organization. Baker Concrete Construction, and then a number of other companies who could very well be present here at COP or even at the Big 5 Global Show in Dubai. So I want to thank all these folks for supporting NEU and look forward to any questions that you might have later. So this concludes my quick talk.
Great, Dean. Thank you so much. And as Dean said, there'll be opportunity to ask some specific questions of Dean and Tony. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Karen Scrivener from EPFL. Karen, over to you.
So thanks for the introduction, and thanks very much to Tony and Dean for giving me the opportunity to sneak into their event here, because I'm going to talk about another very important initiative which we hope that ACI will soon be part of. And this is what we call the Globe Consensus. And the Globe Consensus is really about trying to bring together the different parts of the value chain to achieve more sustainable construction, but particularly by implementing the knowledge we already have. So it's about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's been brought to life by 6 leading international construction engineering associations, which I'm showing you on the next slide. So this is RILAM, which is the International Union of Experts and Laboratories, FIB, which is the other main code-setting body for concrete, CIB, Research for Innovation in Buildings and Construction, European Convention for Construction Steelwork, ABSE, and the International Shell Association. So even though we're talking a lot about concrete, it's not just about concrete. So this globe was set up about 3 years ago during the pandemic. It's bringing together 5,000 experts from over 150 different countries, and really trying to, as I say, integrate the entire chain of construction, material scientists, safety and engineers, consulting engineers, etc., etc. We made a policy document when we last year, and the main observation of this is that we really have to think globally. Globally is essential. Even though the USA is the second largest producer of concrete, in the USA, concrete only accounts for about 1% of their emissions. In the global south, you have countries where it accounts for about 20% of their emissions, because they're using a lot less energy. And this trend is going to continue. Here we see the changing pattern of cement over the last 80 years. Over the last 60 years. And what you see is that, back in 1960, practically all the concrete was in the global north. From the 1980s, we had this huge development in China, and now this is going to change. Everybody thinks of China as being the important place, but that's going to change again in the next 30 years, and we're going to see really the upcoming of India and Africa. Now, when we come back to concrete, but it's also kind of true of other materials, we know we have all these levers for CO2 reductions. We saw these in these previous roadmaps. It's about putting everything together in terms of concrete, first of all making efficient clinker, then substituting as much of that clinker you can with other SEMs, then making concrete efficiently, then making buildings efficiently, and then making sure we use our buildings efficiently, and when we can, we reuse buildings. And we brought out this report in 2017. There was a much more detailed paper that came out just this year, which really highlighted that you could actually save 76% of CO2 with these strategies. It's not 100%, and we have a gap, but I think the important thing about that gap at the bottom is what we need to achieve by carbon capture and storage, which is everything we can't do by the measures at the top. And the important thing about the measures at the top are these can all be implemented at relatively low cost or even negative cost. Whereas when we go to carbon capture and storage, the big thing is going to be the increase in price. This will increase the price of cement by like 2 to 4 times. So when you have these concrete producers who say, well, it's expensive for me to put in another silo for the aggregates, you say to them, well, is that more expensive than paying 4 times for your cement? It's your choice. What do you want to do? And now we need to find ways to implement the known strategies. And I think this is where the low carbon concrete code comes in, precisely because it's mandatory. It's finally something which says to these concrete producers, we know you can come at lower CO2, do it. And that's the thing. And it's not going to necessarily cost them money, it's going to save them money. This is the crazy thing. But we need to combine policy at the 2 levels. I think there's been too much focus on the industry. We're saying, okay, cement producers, you've got to come up with this miracle solution to produce zero carbon concrete. It's simply not possible because of basic chemistry. But also at the client side, we have to have policies which incentivize people to, optimize their use of buildings. And in the industry, we've got to get all the different people working together, working from the beginning to design low-carbon buildings with low-carbon materials. So our first initiative from the Globe Consensus is this Global Building Data Initiative. It's all about metrics. If we can't measure things, we can't improve them. And this is an approach. There was a pilot study which wasn't done by Globe, but this was done in Europe. And here we're trying to express embodied carbon per meter squared of the building. And incidentally, this comes out with exactly the same result that Dean said. All the different types of building material, there aren't so many differences. But what's highlighted here is the huge dispersion, particularly in that first concrete column. So in fact, in this study, the building with the lowest carbon footprint was in concrete, but also the highest one. And if we can make more of the highest ones in the lowest category, we can have massive impact. So that's what it's about. It's about implementing existing knowledge. And, what can you do? Well, we hope you can join the Globe Consensus because this is open to individuals as well as organizations. We need people who can make links across the sector, find ways of bringing the different parts together to implement that, organize workshops, other actions that really can lead to that, and implement them. And I think it's really great that the ACI have implemented this low carbon code. We need more actions like that. So thank you very much.
Karen, thank you very much. And Karen, if I can invite you up onto the panel, as well as Dean and Tony, to sit up on the chairs up here. And great. So I've got some questions, but I can't believe that people in the room haven't got questions. So who in the room's got the first question for our panel? And I know, yes, sir, please. No? You got a question? No? I'm looking at our guest here on the left because Tony, you mentioned just briefly resilience. Now, I mean, we'll come back to CO2. We'll come back to GWP because all our 3 speakers have focused on that, and we understand why the focus is on that. But Tony, you made reference to the fact that in a forthcoming edition, there's awareness that resilience might need to be considered. Do you want to say a few words about that?
Oh, without any doubt. So as I mentioned, the only thing that you can do is to develop a code based on data. Dean said it, you can only make improvement if you know what to measure and how to measure it. And you need to have a benchmark. Luckily enough, today in North America, we have a benchmark on the strength of concrete that comes out of the organization that really monitors ready-mix concrete. And so because of this, we had the ability to develop a measurement and a benchmark based on the strength. But we totally recognize that this is only the beginning of the story. And actually, some of us think that strength is maybe not the most important item, is the use and the durability. And so I think this is what we are going to aim for. Then, Andrew, you mentioned resilience. I think, especially from an academic perspective, resilience and sustainability are the two faces of the same coin. I live in Miami, Florida. How can you have sustainability if you don't have resilience against hurricanes? So I think you cannot talk about sustainability unless you couple it with the resilience. Resilience speaks more to issues related to structural design and structural behavior. But we would be very naive if we were to think that sustainability is only have things that last more on paper. Unfortunately or fortunately, we design buildings and infrastructure, and they have to have a service life, and a service life not only during normal times, but also during challenging times.
So drawing out the challenging times, so not just mitigation on CO2, but adaptation where there's climate change enhanced risks. I just want, Karen, can I bring you, while we just stay on the resilience theme, can I just bring you in on this, on Globe's focus? Completely understandable. We need to address CO2, and as GCCA, we're addressing CO2. But just a few words on what Globe might be doing on the resilience piece.
Yeah, I mean, we're also, this is not my specialty, but we have many people, including the current presidents of Globe Consensus, who is really specialized in, risk analysis and resilience and everything like that. And here, it's a question of making partnerships because, we have to see that this is an issue in ACI, it's also an issue in FIB, it's also an issue in many other places. So what Globe's trying to do is to try and reach across these initiatives and say, where are they similar, where are they different, where can we learn from one to another. So it's a question of, as I say, trying to put the different things together, not redoing it all over again when it's already been done very well by different other organizations.
Brilliant. We've got a question at the back. I'll just bring the microphone down to you.
Thanks. Yeah. My name is Matthias Gelber. I'm originally from Germany, but I live in the Philippines now. I co-founded a company in 2006. We do industrial flooring, cement-free, virtually cement-free. We didn't move into cement because we were told by the cement industry at that time, don't touch cement, otherwise you might get yourself into trouble. But those days have changed, fortunately. I congratulate for the launching of the standard. I think that is excellent. I'm trying to get an understanding of how can different players in the industry use the standard. Can we see a draft? I would love to see a draft. And then secondly, I was a bit surprised. I mean, I'm a friend of cement and, cementitious material. About your statistics with reference to the embodied carbon, comparing the ready-mix concrete with, for example, timber. I would love to understand the scope there, because if we include the biogenic carbon as a sequestration aspect, okay, we have to look at the long-term life cycle and the potential release of the carbon again at the end of life. But I was a little bit surprised that you were showing that the ready-mix concrete supposedly has a lower embodied carbon than the nature-based solution. So I would like to understand the rationale behind that and the scope of the comparison.
So you're referring to the slide that's on the screen that Tony presented, but if you look in the fine print down here, we can actually go straight to the author. So that's even better.
Well, even then, I'm not really the author. The other people in that thing, Hammond and Jones, were where that data comes from. But we have been delving into this question of timber. It's incredibly controversial, and there's loads and loads of different ways of doing it. The basic problems are that, yes, timber can be sustainable if it comes from sustainably managed forests. Only something like 15% of timber that's used in the construction industry does come from sustainably managed forests. Something like 40% of timber used is actually borderline illegal. So, it's just incredibly complicated, and depending on how you do the calculation, you can get different values. I think part of the problem is, and it comes back to that other graph I showed of the dispersion in concrete, that the timber people take an example of a like business as usual concrete building and say we can do much better than that. But if they took what they should do of take an example of the best in class concrete building, you see the advantage really disappears, however you calculate it, even if you calculate the biogenic carbon as well. But we can talk more about that. We have another paper coming out on this. And the big issue about timber is you haven't got enough of it. You know, if you wanted to build everything in timber, which you can't, you would have to have something like a surface of the earth about 5 times what we've got.
Yeah, I think Karen stole my thunder in the sense that I think that not because I'm biased towards concrete, but you cannot imagine a society without concrete. I mean, the structures that we see around us are inherently, they need this material system. Now, the question could be, what are the binders? And that, I think we don't want to go there because there was already a very thorough explanation of what is possible with today's technology, not the future. This could be done today. By the way, if you look at the GCCA roadmap, 33% could be done just by doing proper mixtures and proper design. So the burden is also on structural people like myself. You asked the question about how can the rest of the world in the Philippines, can you use this document? Without any doubt. The entire idea is to give you now an ability to do benchmarking in your country and decide what percentage of that benchmarking you want to improve. For example, for us, the committee has settled on 15%. And now I ask the third part of your question, that is procedural at ACI. And Dean kind of hinted to it. A committee chaired by a great individual by the name of Matt Adams, and the credit for this document goes to him, his people, and the secretary, Andrew Shoker, incredible individuals that have done this in a very short time. Once the committee approves a document, it goes to another body called TAC, the Technical Activities Committee. And so that's where the document is today, and that's why we put that date 24. TAC is very aware of the urgency, so they will move very fast. But then there is another step. Any document that they generate has to go through public discussion. So before it becomes the law of the land, we will have to wait. These are the 2 steps. We're very optimistic, and we think that by March, April, we will have it. The other piece of the puzzle that I think is very important to realize, until this document is adopted by reference by IBC, the International Building Code, in North America, it does not really have a major value. So with the documents, the other codes that deal with safety. So this is a very interesting part where 2 worlds have to get together. The people look at safety and serviceability because you don't want this building to collapse, and the people who look at durability and sustainability. So exciting times. I think we know what to do next, but we need also a little patience.
Brilliant, Tony, thank you. Just to pick up a reference of people here and those joining online, World Resources Institute issued a publication this year. Land Squeeze is in the title, and they'll talk through some of the carbon accounting complexity that Karen referred to, and also the very large percentage that doesn't satisfy the condition that you often read. The condition you often read is if the timber is sustainably sourced, and then you read 6 pages or 12 pages or 24 pages on how good it is, but the first lines are if it is sustainably sourced. And basically the Land Squeeze document from WRI puts that into a big question mark as to how it is. And just on that, and we've touched on resilience. Another really important aspect of sustainability beyond CO2 is biodiversity, and significant work is done by the extractives industry in complying with biodiversity requirements, and our members commit to a net positive on biodiversity. And so when you're considering other materials, you want to just ask the question about what are they doing on biodiversity in terms of their production processes. We've got people joining online. If you're online, you can ask us questions. Mahmoud Ronaldo has already done that. his question is, how can we work to raise awareness with engineers, especially for this new type of concrete, because they are the real users of concrete? Who'd like to take that question? Dean.
So that's a great question. Being a structural engineer myself, I struggle with this. Just thinking about how do we make it easier for the guys that are taking responsibility from a structural standpoint. Through NEU, we had a recent summit where we discussed amongst a room of about 40 industry stakeholders and identified education as being one of our top priorities. And so we thought, okay, there's a lot of different stakeholders. Who do we start with? And lo and behold, it was the licensed design professionals. Why? Because they have such a big impact on the type of material that is basically ultimately approved and used in a project. And of course, they're the ones that have to abide by ACI 318. So that's going to be our first priority. And we do know that structural engineers are conservative by nature. So we're going to ask them to get out of their comfort zone a little bit. But to do that, we have to have education. So that's one of the primary missions of NEU is education. So we're happy to do that. We're working on it now.
Yeah, I think it's just important to say that, you know, a lot of this is not really new concrete. It's concrete the guys who know what they're doing are making already, you know. So that's really why we can have confidence that it's going to perform well structurally. It's just saying, let's put the best practice everywhere.
Maybe some of the novelties don't really necessarily come from the materials. For example, and I was kind of surprised that the CEO of Cemex did not mention it. In their plant in Monterrey, Mexico, they are using recycled water as mixing water. So the progress we can make with respect to the constituents of concrete is immense. It's not only the binders, the aggregates, but is also the water. So I think the future is bright if we use intelligently what we have already available.
Brilliant. Tony, thank you so much. Any further questions from the floor? Yes, sir.
You know, knowing that a major user of concrete, of course, are engineers, but also given the chart, and 60% of all cement that's sold in the country is sold to those non-engineered informal houses. Yes, and so that's a lot of concrete. That's a lot more concrete that's going to get used in places like Africa and Southeast Asia. How are you guys thinking? That's exactly our zone of work. How are you guys thinking about sharing or disseminating this type of knowledge to do part of what we also do, which is improve construction practices and making better use of concrete, because that's where actually concrete really shines if you use it well in this context. The long lifespan, the love it receives from its users is really interesting versus, you know, other more vulnerable materials that are even harder to get right in terms of resilience.
Brilliant. From build change, you didn't. Yeah. Let's be clear. From build change.
So sorry to hog the microphone again, and I'll give it to Tony in a minute. But I think, you know, speaking here with my personal professor hat on, this is really the area we're trying to engage with now, because, you know, the informal sector is so important. We've got actually a very good material there, concrete blocks. Concrete blocks may have up to even 5 times less CO2 than clay-fired bricks. And, you know, they're excellent materials, but they're not really, nobody actually looks at them. And, you know, we've just started a simple project. Well, if we swap out the binder, we put in, you know, a low-carbon binder like LC3, and we optimize the aggregate packing. Can we make these blocks even better? And we can show we can halve the carbon footprint again. So I think this is the kind of thing that people need to think about. You know, I mean, people are educated as structural engineers. They want to build these very high-rise buildings like we see around us. To be honest, these buildings are not the most efficient use of concrete, because when you go very high, you have to put a lot more concrete in, so you get less bang for your buck. So I think some of us need to go back more to thinking about these informal housing systems and how we can optimize that, how we can help people. Because, you know, you go to Ghana and you see that at the end of the year somebody buys a cement few bags of cement, he makes enough concrete blocks to build the first story of his house, and then in a few years' time, he can build the next story, you know, and that's the way it goes.
Yeah, and this was the point that I think we have made throughout the session, that the low carbon has to be a regional issue. When you are in countries where 60% and above comes from sacks rather than ready-mix plant, you have a totally different story. Karen mentioned something also very important that I wanted to mention. The techniques in which you make concrete could be very sustainable. For example, what we define as dry cast, the making of these blocks or other units, can save a very significant amount of binder. So again, these are all tools that we have. We just need to apply them. The challenge is to go in the emerging economies where you also have to educate the people. So it's easier sometimes to speak to engineers or contractors, but when you have to speak to the individuals who are building their own home, is very difficult. So I think the other message that I've heard around COP28 is we need to change culture. This is sustainability culture. So it cannot be just us, it has to be also the people who utilize these technologies. Not simple, but we're going to get there.
We've got one final question at the back. I'll just bring the microphone.
Actually, my voice is loud enough. Actually, it's more of a contribution rather than a question, and it relates to developing countries. I've been puzzled by a product in the Philippines that is sold as a cement, and I asked the guy who was behind it to give me the data, and I evaluated his carbon footprint if my calculation is correct, because he only uses 10% clinker. It's 300 CO2e per ton of cement, and I've calculated if he were to go renewable 100%, which he cannot do for political reasons, for local, power supply issues, it could go down to 150. He only works at 200 Celsius. He has alkaline activation, but it's not just geopolymeric. He has two different locations where he uses a different system, and nobody knows that it's low carbon. He is selling it as a cheap cement. He's never done any green branding, and I wrote an article about him. Maybe that's the first time that there's been an attempt to calculate his carbon footprint. But I wonder how case studies like that can be shared and get a bigger platform to inspire other developing countries that, there are different options.
Yeah, so we are always looking for case studies like that, so please, I'll give you my business card and we can talk more, because those are the types of things that we need to educate folks about and show real world examples of how things have been done, because it's amazing that they've been doing this all along and haven't utilized the green message, so to speak. Can't imagine what sort of business they would get after making that publicly known. So please, that's NEU's mission is, promoting that type of knowledge.
And also independently verifying and validating those claims that are made. Do you want to make that point?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously that's what our validation and verification program is all about. Is if they're going to make a claim in the marketplace, there's, we have a program that we can validate that claim through, and it's through an ISO 17,000 series conformity assessment standard. It's not something that we're just making up off the top of our heads. It's something that is, internationally recognized as this is the way you do it. We're still working on the pricing structure. We're piloting several clients right now through it, just to make sure that we've got all of our policies and procedures and pricing to where it needs to be. I will tell you that we're not formulating it as if it's a profit center, so basically break even so that we can get as much depth into the market as possible.
So we've heard about the opportunities of using the material as a resilient material to address concerns that are broader than just CO2, and we've got a route forward in terms of the standard and the assessment and verification of products of producing, and the evidence and the information of how people can use these low CO2 products for themselves. Thank you for joining us online. Thank you for joining us here. And one last time, if you can join me in thanking our speakers from today.
Thank you.